The future of finance is sustainable. Joining us for a panel discussion on the purpose economy is Peter Cunnane, Director of International and National Initiatives at Innovate Finance, introducing his panel members to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Fintech Week London this afternoon. We are indeed here to discuss the future of finance and its sustainability. My name is Peter Cunnane, and with me on the panel today, I have a collection of guests that are going to bring to you a really great discussion around the purpose economy and what we can do to make it more sustainable. For us collectively, the breadth of this subject around the sustainability of business practices, the health of our planet, the growing importance of the greening of finance and fintech, and the impact through the value of driven consumption is very key to all of us. And we're very conscious, of course, of the increasing awareness of consumerism in these issues and its importance to the future of our financial services, whether that's through our personal finance, our financial wellness, financial inclusion, and the really important role that financial services and fintech increasingly plays in this space. I am the Director of International Initiatives at Innovate Finance. Innovate Finance, of course, the UK's preeminent trade organisation for the global fintech sector. And for us, the role of SMEs in this space, supporting consumers and businesses, is key. We are working towards developing a policy across the entire ecosystem to create opportunities for partnerships to stimulate new solutions and to link with those people making these decisions, which obviously have an impact on our lives. And it's therefore a very important discussion for us, but less about me, more about the great guests I have with me today. I'm introduced on the panel by Tiama Hanson-Drury, who is the Chief Product Officer at Minna. Tiama joined Minna earlier this year and is helping to drive the firm's mission to become the leading subscription management platform. The firm, as it expands through Europe and continues its growth into new and exciting markets, including the United States and Australia. She brings over 15 years of experience in driving product-led growth, most recently as EVP of Product at consumer data platform company Dynata. And before that, EVP of Product at enterprise research platform firm Zappi. Previously, she held senior leadership positions at Kantar and WPP. So we're really pleased to have Tiama with us. Minna, of course, is a subscription management services firm via main banking apps. Also on the panel today, I have Matt Higham, Chief Digital Officer and Sustainability Lead for Enterprise at Microsoft UK. Matt's roles centre around creating market disruption through deep partnership with their customers. He is a passionate leader in the use of technology for social good and for working in harmony with the planet, its resources, while securing a more equitable future for all. Matt leads co-innovation to create market-leading solutions, working alongside product engineering and research teams to bring science-based impact and transformation. Matt also sits on Tech UK's Climate Strategy and Resilience Council, which provides a strategic direction for all industry activities related to climate risk, resilience, energy transition, and net zero carbon. So really pleased to have Matt here. And of course, Microsoft's sustainability efforts include their recent partnership with NatWest to help UK businesses better understand their carbon footprint and create tailored action plans to reduce their carbon emissions. So welcome, Matt. And we also delighted to have Adi Engel, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of vcita. Adi is responsible for leading vcita's strategic thinking, global marketing, objectives in supporting micro and small businesses on their journey towards success, digital transformations. Coupled with her own business acumen, Adi has a host of experience and consumer-centric product knowledge, and she constantly brings into new, innovative and company-wide initiatives that are guided by her passion for enabling the inclusion of the underserved. And Adi and vcita manage clients, appointments and payments from one single app. So panelists, welcome, and thank you for being here this afternoon. Matt, let's start with you, and let's get this discussion going around the issue of sustainability. As I've cited there, Microsoft have taken significant steps to not only, lean towards carbon neutrality, but by being carbon negative, have partnered with NatWest, as I just mentioned, to help businesses better understand their carbon footprint. What role do you believe that, the tech, financial services and fintech sectors should be playing in driving this important agenda forward? And what more do you think businesses can do to address this global issue?
Thanks. Yeah, I think the best thing we can do is support each other in democratising technology into the market at speed and at pace, leveraging our size and scale, certainly on a Microsoft perspective, so that we can help startups and fintechs to be able to really scale beyond just that immediate innovation piece. But the key part is, whilst we're doing that, we're changing the voice in the boardroom. We spend a lot of time in boardrooms, and there are kind of three camps that are emerging. The ones that think they can creatively account their way out of this, the ones that are diligently waiting for regulation to comply, and then the ones that want to be leaders. And we want to be seen as those leaders where we're inverting our superpowers back to the market to be able to change the game. And I think the more we can do that, the more we will convert the boardrooms to be more accountable and responsible.
And with Microsoft and the role businesses like Microsoft playing such an important role in improving transparency and accountability across financial services, what further do you think your firm could do in that space as well to improve that accountability?
We're hugely invested in partnerships with organisations like the CDP, the WBCSD, the World Bank and the Bank of England to try and open up transparency around disclosure, setting the standards. We don't want to create a new standard, we want to bring to bear the power of technology so that we can democratise the transparency of that, so open up the transparency of the data. We're no longer blocked by technology, we can do this at scale, have multi-party data ecosystems in an open data mechanism across varying different industries. The data is there, we're just not surfacing it in the right way. It's still in lots of silos being held behind doors of intellectual property and monetisation. So we really need to change the culture. So a lot of this is what we're trying to bring to bear into market.
Tiama, I see you shaking your head vigorously there. You've got anything that you want to sort of lean into that as well in terms of the importance that the role of data has to play?
I mean, I just couldn't agree more. I come from, previous to this, it was all around connected data and building different products off of that. And it's just always so frustrating to see an organization that has so much data at its fingertips but doesn't understand how to connect that in a way that is tangible to business outcomes. And in this case, green is business outcomes. So I just say more power to them and helping understand how to do that, right? And allow that transparency. Because most of the time, these organizations, they just need help. They just need a bridge to be able to know how to do that.
For sure. Thank you. Adi, vcita uses technology. Going from the size of Microsoft to a firm such as yours, you use technology to help SMEs to better serve their clients, and you've spoken previously about the importance of ensuring digital and digitalisation is not exclusive. In your view, what can we all do to drive greater digital inclusion? What are the benefits for all of us in doing that?
I think when it comes to digitalization, obviously there's the power to democratize. Obviously there's the power to allow the consumer or the small business owner to actually own their own data and use it as they see fit, which is extremely important. But there's also the likelihood that we actually block out the people who are not as comfortable with digital environments as we might be, who do not have the guidance or the tools to use that technology. So I think the greatest example is we've seen a lot of digitalization of financial institutions, and that works for scale, and that works for them to ingest data that is supposedly creating equal opportunities because data is in itself non-biased. But at the same time, if I was a small business 20 years ago and I wanted to get access to finance, I would have to write down a business plan. I would have to print out all of my invoices, proof of the fact that I that I'm a viable business, and then I would have to put on my best suit and go to the branch and see the branch manager that I probably know since I was a teenager because I've been, and they would basically vouch for me, right? That would have been the underwriting process 20 years ago. And nowadays, as those branches are closed, and we've seen that, during COVID as well, where people couldn't actually get physical access to bank branches, we are asking those businesses to figure out basically how to communicate with the ecosystem on the same level and with the same language of the ecosystem. So how do we do that, and how do we not only make sure that the ecosystem itself, the financial institutions, with the support of businesses such as Microsoft, do the transition, but we also go to the small business owners and allow them to go through the transition as well in their own terms, in their level of comfort with what it is that they're doing. So yeah, I mean, we have to look at both sides of the equation. We have to make sure that the small businesses are being supported in doing this process as well.
And you talked there about the importance, or the historic importance, increasingly historic importance of the bank branch, the bricks and mortar. It makes us think, obviously, the financial institutions across financial services in the city that obviously still have a key role to play. And Tiama, I know your firm, the technology you've got equips those same institutions, to give consumers a greater control over their financial wellness. I mean, do you see the links between digital inclusion, financial literacy, education, and how do you see that all coming together, and how might this help in the ultimate goal of improving financial wellness?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the journey towards financial wellness as being kind of an evolutionary process, right? So it starts with really understanding the basic concepts, and then understanding those concepts and the greater context around them. So how do they apply to you? Then putting them into place, applying them actually. And then capability, building confidence. So it's really difficult to try to achieve financial wellness if you don't understand your own financial situation related to basic financial concepts. And if you don't have the opportunity to put that knowledge and that understanding into practice, you're not going to build up the confidence to really feel like you can reach financial wellness. So when I think about it, it's about how do we build literacy with people so that they can then go on and build confidence to take a wellness approach. And so, Minna, I mean, one of the things that really appealed to me about it is being a consumer who is part of the rising, subscription economy, right? We all have so many subscriptions, and yet people don't realize how many they have, right? So when I think back to that process, one of the things we do is we help you understand that actually you have this many subscriptions, right? That's one thing. And then two, how can you manage those? Okay, how do we, again, going back to that evolutionary process, so now you understand the concepts and you understand that you've got these, how do you actually take control of those and then make that easy, right? And so that's what our tech does. It basically allows you to identify that you've got those subscriptions, which most people don't realize how many they have, and then take control of them. And so, by making that available within the financial incumbent banking world, like within the mobile app, we really democratize access to a group of people that aren't necessarily the folks using Starling or Revolut or Monzo, right? But they tend to be the people who have the more, the relationship with more of the incumbents, right? And so that was really the thing that appealed to me, is opening up financial literacy and the ability to build, confidence towards wellness to a portion of the population that maybe is not digitally native, right? Does that make sense?
Of course. I was just thinking as you were talking there, we've been through a very traumatic period for society, a large economy, over the last 17, 18, however long it is now. I feel like I've lost a year somewhere in the middle there.
I think we all have.
What time is it? The importance over that time of increased awareness of financial education, financial inclusion, knowing where our apps sit, actually reaching out to those areas perhaps in society that were not previously as well connected to financial services. Question for all of you really, How do you feel that that is progressing? Is it something that if we were to take one positive away from this awful year, I mean, is that one positive we can take away?
Who wants to go first?
I could. I think there were amazing commitments that were made across the ecosystem to support, in our case, it's small businesses. In many places, it was consumers. I think the commitments have been made about 12 to 14 months ago, when people realized how this is going to be a long game. And what we see right now is that people are actually looking for ways to step up and actually make the commitments that they've made last year. So we've been in this business for 10 years now. We have seen unparalleled commitment, and we've been to some amazing discussions that we haven't been in the previous 8 to 9 years. What I do feel, however, is that people might still be scrambling, trying to figure out how does that work? What are the new rules? How do we work together to facilitate all of those commitments that were made? But definitely you have to start somewhere, right? And the first step is by making a public commitment to what you're about to do.
Tiama, anything to add to that?
I think there's a lot of positive trends in terms of adopting digital banking and digital finance apps, right? We all know the stats, so I won't bore us with them. And that's been great progress to see during COVID. But at the same time, we've also signed up to more trials for new products. We've also signed up for more services. And my biggest fear with those things is that you have a tendency to spend much more than you realize. And if you don't get out proactively ahead of that and help a consumer be aware of that and take control of it, you can have, subscriptions, I speak from that perspective, are a great thing, right? They help businesses to tap into segments of the market who can't afford their services up front. They're great for consumers because you can pay over time, right? But those things are nothing if what they do is they just eat up more of your spend in a way that you're not conscious of and that you're not doing as part of strategic wellness, financial wellness. So, I think great to see so many trends that are positive this year, but I think companies like yours and the work that Microsoft is doing to make sure that there's enrichment of data and awareness around that is critical. I'm sure Matt could build on that.
Please, Matt.
Yeah, I think the last 18 months has held up several lenses of our fractured relationship with planet, society, and a number of different things. And it's been quite shocking, the realization when you really look at the data that sits behind that. Even children's access to devices within the UK alone, trying to get access to education that they are supposed to be able to get access to. So how do we combat that? And I think it goes back to partly to do with financial literacy, but also sustainable and social literacy.
Yes.
Is the impacts that we can interconnect those three elements, then we can start to really empower it through technology. And I think that's the key word, is it's all about empowerment. How can you empower someone to live a more sustainable lifestyle? Or how can a company become more sustainable? How do they understand the difference between financial well-being and the value exchange into sustainable well-being? You've got this superpower of data now, the amount of data that we're consuming about people. We should be able to start instigating behaviour change towards a more sustainable lifestyle, and that's the key part for me.
And in terms of the last year and perhaps looking forward to the next year, how well would you score us, Matt, in terms of reaching for that goal? Poor at the moment.
Because it's been the year of commitment. I mean, which is great. It's the first step. It's a perfect step. Let's get scaled execution through partnerships as well. Stop trying to do it in a silo. There's probably so many organisations that are still trying to set the greatest standard for sustainability metrics or financial well-being metrics, rather than clubbing together, agreeing on one standard and just moving forward. It took us 18 years to confound around one standard for financial reporting. We haven't got 18 years for sustainability or socio-economic gaps. So how can we start working in a much more open and collegiate ecosystem rather than trying to just look at the competitive advantage?
And what steps do you think we could be taking to close that socio-economic gap? I mean, what what are the immediate things that we could be doing, and perhaps what are the things that we should be thinking about over the next couple of years?
For me, it centres around 4 T's. So really, I guess it's transparency for obvious reasons. It's setting a target, then setting a plan for transition, that absolute execution plan, and building trust through partnerships. If we can all follow those 4 kind of mantras, then I'm sure we'll move forward a lot quicker.
Yeah, thank you. Around, actually, I'll throw this one to Addy, if I may. Around the experience that we have of more effectively engaging with our consumers, and it sounds like we all need to collectively make that happen to meet some of Matt's goals in terms of the next couple of years. I know you have experience of talking to both the public and the private sector, and we've seen so much of that sense of collaboration over the last 12 months, 15 months. How can we build from that to be truly effectively engaging with our consumers, in your view?
Well, I think possibly the biggest gap here is, again, finding the consumers where they are, as opposed to remaining where you are. It's almost like, in the same way that Matt is seeing siloing of data, and we're seeing that as well, there's also siloing of content. You can see that during COVID, almost all big institutions, whether governmental or financial institutions or associations, anyone supporting consumers through this process, they all launched a support hub or a learning center, or they've created their own content, of course, and they've put it on a very fancy link on their site. And how would consumers even know that it's there? I mean, consumers aren't looking, first of all, specifically on our sites for this content, and also they are bombarded with different versions of the same content. So if we were to be helpful to them in any way, we need to first of all curate ourselves, and by the way, partner around those areas as well, and then find them where they are. On social media, for example. Is it beyond us to actually go on TikTok to make those things available? I wouldn't even know how to access it, but I'm sure, them being the main sponsor of the match last night, people know how to find them, and this is where they are. And I think if there's one thing that kind of I find incredible throughout this is, we talk to people, they show us the infrastructure that they created. We ask them, how many people do you have on this? How do you get people to engage with this? And to be honest, most of them, some of them did, and they're great in leading this trend, but most of them didn't think of this through. So I think, as much as working on top of those platforms might have some commercial complications, might require some extra work from our end, we need to make sure that we make ourselves available to whoever we're trying to support, and not the other way around, because content out of context or in silo means nothing. So that's where I would start.
And here was I hoping to get through this without mention of last night as well. Matt, if I could just come back to you on the point around inclusivity. We've talked a lot about the connection with consumers. What about the smaller businesses? Because I appreciate their needs will be different, and Microsoft has transformed all our lives as well in many ways, particularly over the last 12 months. What's the important connectivity there with this agenda for the smaller businesses?
Yeah, the SMB market is pivotal to sustainable and financial well-being of the country. I mean, it's absolutely pivotal, but they don't have either the financial capital fluidity to be able to make huge investments in digital or anything else, or fundamental changes in their operating structure. So how can we work in partnership as a big organisation to help that happen? But the other part is give them the tools so they can understand their Scope 3 emissions as well as their inclusion in others' Scope 3 supply chains. So at scale, simply and easily, without having to incur vast amounts of cost. And then it's working with them to understand how we can really change the game with regards to financial markets. I mean, we're doing a lot in things like residential homes in the UK, which carries a huge amount of embedded carbon, poor energy efficiency, but it's going to cost 51 billion over the next 10 years to transition residential homes in the UK alone. That's a great market for the SMB market to be involved in, but they can't all do it at scale. So how can we really lean in to help them support that?
And Tiama, are you finding that some of the companies, some of the larger firms you're working with, are they going through a similar sort of thought process to what Matt's outlined there?
Yes, but I mean, I think there's something in both what Matt and Adi were saying that it's interesting and we should really hit on, which is like, you don't have to do this all alone, right? This concept, for the last 4 or 5 years, people have been talking about embedded finance, but really let's talk about embedded fintech and the partnership element and the ability to either go, as you say, where they are, where the consumer is, or bring it in where you are. And I think one of the things, a great example of that is, there's lots of fintech companies in the space that enrich data within a consumer's trusted environment, right? And so the companies that we're working with, they're dealing with that and they can bring in green context, right? They can bring in green context to the spending data within a retail banking environment, help a consumer understand the green footprint of their spend, right? Understand the ESG profile of their spend. I think it's something that's really important, the big established institutions in general, whether you're a finance institution or you're a publishing institution, it doesn't matter. The thing you have in common is it can feel prohibitive to move quickly. And I think the most important thing that I would want people to take away from this is that embedded fintech gives you a wealth of tools that allows you to connect to the consumer in a way that gives them the information that's necessary to help them feel more in control of any of the ESG stuff, whether it's green sustainability, financial wellness sustainability, right, any of those things. So I think that's something that's important that we hit on because we're all three saying it in a certain way, and yet you were talking a little bit about the boardroom flavors that you get, right? And we probably all know those with the big financial institutions too. There's the people who kind of see the hopefulness of bringing in partnerships versus there's the people who think they need to build it all themselves. And we don't have 18 years, right? We need to move faster. And I think partnerships is one of the best ways to offer that context and those better services to consumers. So not to go off track there, but it's an important point that's linking across all three of us.
No, absolutely, and that linkage between the angle from which we're all coming at this is very clear, and I think you're absolutely right. It is time critical.
Yeah.
We've lost 12 months. We've got to make so much time back now, and look forward to the next 12, 18 months and see what we can do collaboratively, collectively to get through this. We've talked about a lack of transparency even. And available data, and it seems it could be really challenging to be a fully conscious or conscientious consumer in today's market. Tiama, coming back to you, if I may, how are again the financial services, the fintech businesses supporting and facilitating people's needs to make more conscious buying decisions, and what can we do more in the way of data standards and policy to support them?
I won't get into data standards as much because I think Matt can probably add a lot to that. But what I will say is that you have an entire segment of the population now who is consciously making a decision to avoid call centers, right? They're consciously avoiding anything that makes them do anything that's not a digital experience, right? And so if you're not looking at what is the customer life cycle, what is the journey of them within your application or within your environment, and saying, how am I going to enrich that at each point with a digital experience? You're not going to be serving, a conscientious experience to your population set, right? Because increasingly, the percentage of people who are refusing to call in and ask a question, that number is skyrocketing, right? So thinking about, how do you empower these people, which is, at Minna, that's our tagline, empowering the modern consumer. Well, I don't know, don't make it more complicated. Think about the customer journey. Think about what are the steps that they need, the pain points that they have, and how can you make that effortless, right? How can you make that, painless? And, it's just a really practical example. The biggest pain point, consumers have with subscriptions, aside from knowing that they have them, which I've already spoken about, is canceling them. Right? They don't want them, but they don't want to spend, who here has had to try and cancel a subscription where you end up getting stuck on the phone with God knows who and God knows where for however long, right? And so bring that to the front of the app, make it easy, right? And you can just take that type of idea about like the pain points across the journey and try to bring conscious control to those consumers. And it doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. We don't need to get lost in all the technology. That's my biggest advice is strip it down to the bare essentials. Try to explain it to your grandmother, right? The pain points that someone is going through, and then look to add value to that. Digital makes it easier than ever before to do that.
Sure, I hear you on that. Ali, I mean, to add to that, in terms of your own experience, a viewpoint on that same question around, the facilitating, people to make those sorts of decisions.
Well, we've been taking the same kind of big business technologies to the small business sector, and we're allowing small businesses to engage with their customers on very much the same level. Can I book my next session online? Can I make the payment online? Can I get a quote and approve it online? And this, I actually did have a presentation that said something like bringing big business tools to small businesses at some point many years ago. But and I think what we're seeing is the same kind of transition for that sector, which eventually is the majority of businesses in any economy. We're talking about 90% of businesses that are out there. So a lot of the day-to-day interactions of the consumer are with these types of businesses. And I remember I once had a conversation with a person who was consulting small businesses about their process. And many of them start off by saying, this is not interesting to my customers who are local and possibly not technically savvy, and they wouldn't know how to book with me online. And then he would ask them, do you shop on Amazon? Are you looking for reviews? Are you booking your own whatever services that you're getting online? Are you paying digitally online? And of course, every single person in the room would say, yes, I am. And when you're asking, like, so who do you think your consumers are that are suddenly completely unable to do the same comparison process, the same payment process, the same booking process, if you are just a local small business? Of course, everyone is happy and willing and very much keen to have these kind of experiences, regardless of who they're interacting with. So definitely I can see this going throughout, from the biggest possible subscription service that I can have to the smallest, to my booking at the hair appointment tomorrow. I would want to have access and, the ability to make those changes online. So yeah, I can absolutely see that.
And Matt, we might not all have access to TikTok, but I'm sure we all have access to Microsoft somewhere in our lives. I mean, does that ring true of your thoughts around the lack of transparency and the data point? I mean, what do you think we can be doing to sort of ease some of the challenges that we've heard there?
I think we touched on it earlier, but a lot of data was seen as the new oil for so many years. We've been talking about that for the last 20 years, hence why it's been ring-fenced. It's got value exchange based upon intellectual property or monetization or some other kind of hyper-growth within market. We've got to start tagging data with different value metrics, and we've got to be holding those value metrics up as important as the economic growth. So the socio-economic impact, the planetary impact of that data, especially if we can collaborate across either geo-borders or industries or organizations. And until we do that, we're not going to see that proliferation. There is the other arm, though. We've now got the move of the new style of internet people. I think 768 million people have come online in the last 2 years. Using that level of data, the data you get from that consumer, we're triggering everything around cost and usage and all that kind of great stuff. Well, how can we also use that data to trigger behavior change around sustainable, or even triggering people more into the circular economy, reuse, sharing, all of those kind of elements, and the regenerative capitalism that's available in all of the assets that we continue to buy. But we've got to be able to demonstrate that end to end across the pipeline. So we really need open, transparent ecosystems to be able to do that.
Thanks, Matt. And As we round out our discussion, I'm going to ask each of you if you would have a call to action to present to our audience over there, in terms of what you think we should all be doing to build on the purpose of economy and the sustainability of our financial system. Matt, I can probably take a punt, but please tell us what you would do and what our audience should be doing.
Be as creative and as bold as you possibly can. Don't just reach for compliance, reach for new opportunities.
Short and succinct and very important, of course. Tiama.
Humanize it and work on it now. Like, do not let complacency or waiting around for someone else to tell you how to do this. Just humanize it. Think about your own experience. I think Addie did a great thing of trying to humanize her conversation with her customers about, do you purchase on Amazon, right? Like,
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate it. Humanize it and try to act quickly, because time is ticking, and every minute that you let go by, you're responsible for the impact that has.
Addie?
I would pick up on that and say, yes, basically say what you mean. We've seen over the last couple of years a huge kind of call to action to say, go online. All businesses go online. This is your way forward. But how does that translate? So if I'm a fitness instructor, am I to be Joe Wicks now? Or if I'm, if I'm a corner shop, do I now become, an Amazon seller for my, dairy products and my, the bread? And I think in that respect, we have to stop using, slogans and just be very specific and also personalize and humanize what it is that we're suggesting that people do. And I think in that respect, we have to, yes, shed a lot of layers of marketing talk and, shed potentially a lot of layers of, loyalty to our own brand and just start telling people, this is the way forward, this is what you need to do, here are the tools as well as the content, hopefully on top of a single platform, and don't go shopping for it. And yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that was said before.
So in conclusion, I think what we want to get the message that we want to get across is, obviously, of course, technology and fintech have a really important role to play in unlocking that gap between the consumer experience and the company experience and our ability to access services. We are very conscious of the need to address issues around transparency and available data. And from all of you, what I've heard is the clock is ticking. We have lost time this last year. We're losing time all the time. But actually, there's a lot that we need to do in terms of ensuring that some of the socio-economic gaps are filled. And actually, there's a really important role that all of our firms can play here in achieving this. And you, the audience, can also participate in this important work as well. Unfortunately, we could not have Joe Wicks here with us, but I was absolutely delighted to have Tiama, Addie and Matt with me today. My name's been Peter Cunnane, and this has been a fantastic session. Thank you very much. Hope you've all enjoyed it at home.